Most people think they have a money problem, but the truth is they have a principle problem. You're not broke because of your job, your background, or your circumstances. You're broke because you've been operating outside of a system that was designed to produce wealth. The Bible is not just a spiritual book, it's a wealth manual. And hidden inside it are principles that have made ordinary people extraordinarily successful. The problem? Most people read it for comfort, not for strategy. They pray for increase, but ignore instruction. They want overflow, but reject obedience. And until that changes, nothing changes. In this message, you're going to discover the exact biblical truths about wealth that most people overlook, and how applying them can completely transform your financial life. This is not about luck. This is about alignment. And once you align with the right principles, wealth is no longer a mystery. It becomes predictable. Let me tell you something most people never stop to consider. Wealth doesn't start in your bank account. It starts in your mind. And until that shifts, nothing else will. See, we've been conditioned to believe that money is the solution. If I just had more money, my problems would go away. If I just had a better job, a better opportunity, then everything would change. But that's not what the truth teaches. Money is not the root, it's the fruit. And fruit always grows from something deeper. The real issue is not your wallet, it's your thinking. Because you can give someone money without changing their thinking. And eventually, they'll end up right back where they started. Why? Because their mindset will always recreate their reality. This is why you see people win the lottery and lose it all. This is why you see people rise fast and fall even faster. It's not a money problem, it's a thinking problem. The truth is, poverty is not just a lack of finances, it's a pattern of thinking. It's believing there's never enough. It's focusing on limitations instead of possibilities. It's making decisions from fear instead of faith. And as long as that mindset is in place, no amount of money will ever be enough to fix it. But when your thinking changes, everything changes. Because now, instead of chasing money, you start attracting opportunities. Instead of reacting to life, you start creating results. Instead of asking, how can I get more? You begin asking, who do I need to become to produce more? That's a completely different conversation. See, wealth flows to people who think differently. People who understand that value is created in the mind before it ever shows up in the marketplace. Every business, every innovation, every solution that generates wealth started as an idea. And that idea came from a certain way of thinking. So the question is not, how do I make more money? The question is, how do I upgrade my thinking so I can produce more value? Because when you think at a higher level, you start to see things others don't see. You recognize opportunities others overlook. You solve problems others complain about. And that's where wealth is created. Not in working harder, but in thinking better. Most people have been taught to trade time for money. Work more hours, get more pay. But there's a limit to that. You only have so much time. But when your thinking expands, you realize you don't have to be limited by time. You can create systems, you can multiply your impact, you can reach more people, and when you do that, your income is no longer tied to your effort, it's tied to your effectiveness. And here's where it gets even deeper. Your thinking determines what you believe is possible for you. If you believe wealth is out of reach, you'll never pursue it. If you believe success is for other people, you'll subconsciously sabotage your own progress. But when you start aligning your thinking with truth, when you start seeing yourself as capable, as called to create, as designed to produce, you begin to move differently. You take bolder actions. You make wiser decisions. You stop settling for less than what you're capable of. And over time, those decisions compound into results. That's how wealth is built. It's not overnight. It's not luck. It's the natural outcome of thinking in alignment with principles that work every single time. And here's the part most people miss. You don't have to wait for your circumstances to change before you change your thinking. You can make that decision right now. You can decide to stop thinking like someone who's stuck and start thinking like someone who creates. You can decide to stop focusing on what you lack and start focusing on what you can build. Because once your thinking shifts, your actions follow. And once your actions follow, your results have no choice but to change. And when that happens, money is no longer something you chase. It becomes something you attract as a direct result of who you've become. Change your thinking and you change your financial future. Now, once your thinking begins to shift, the next thing that has to be corrected is how you understand money itself. Because most people have been taught a system that sounds logical, but it doesn't produce real wealth. They've been taught that if you just work harder, put in more hours, stay busy, eventually you'll get ahead. But let's be honest, that's not what we see happening in the real world. There are people working harder than ever, yet still struggling financially. So the issue can't be effort. The truth is, you don't get paid for how hard you work. You get paid for the value you bring to the marketplace. And that right there changes everything. Because if money were tied to effort, the hardest working people would be the wealthiest. But that's not the case. There are people working long hours in physically demanding jobs who barely make ends meet, while others who may not work nearly as hard physically are generating massive income. Why? Because they understand something different. They understand value. Value is the result you create for others. It's the problems you solve, the solutions you provide, the impact you make. And the greater the problem you solve, or the more people you serve, the greater the value and the greater the compensation. That's a principle that doesn't fail. So instead of asking, how can I work harder? The better question becomes, how can I become more valuable? Because when you increase your value, your income has no choice but to rise to match it. Think about it like this. If you can solve a problem for one person, that's valuable. But if you can solve that same problem for 1,000 people, now your value has multiplied. And if you can create a system that allows you to solve that problem at scale, now you've stepped into a completely different level of income. This is why some people stay stuck financially. They've tied their income to their effort instead of their value. They've limited themselves to what they can do with their own time and energy. But wealth is created when you move beyond that limitation and start focusing on impact. And here's the part that many people overlook. Value is not just about what you do, it's about how well you do it. Two people can be in the same field, doing the same type of work, but one gets paid significantly more. Why? Because they've developed a higher level of skill. They've increased their ability to produce results. So if you want to increase your income, don't just look for more opportunities. Look for ways to improve your ability. Study, learn, practice, grow. Because every time you upgrade your skills, you increase your value. And every time you increase your value, you expand your earning potential. Now let's take it even further. There's also a connection between value and service. Wealth is not created by focusing on yourself. It's created by focusing on others. The more people you help, the more problems you solve, the more wealth you generate. It's a direct relationship. This is why a mindset shift is so critical. When you start thinking in terms of service instead of survival, everything changes. You stop asking, what can I get? And you start asking, what can I give? And paradoxically, that's when you begin to receive more than you ever have before, because the marketplace rewards those who bring solutions, not those who bring need. And here's something else to understand. Value is not always obvious at first. Sometimes the thing that creates the most value is something simple, something others overlook. But when you develop the ability to see problems clearly and create solutions effectively, you position yourself in a way that makes you indispensable. That's where leverage begins. Leverage is when your value works for you, even when you're not actively working. It's when your ideas, your systems, your solutions continue to produce results at scale. And when you reach that level, income is no longer limited by your time. It's driven by your impact. So instead of chasing money, start chasing mastery. Instead of focusing on effort, focus on effectiveness. Instead of trying to do more, focus on becoming more. Because the moment you truly understand that money follows value, you stop running after it, and you start becoming the kind of person it naturally flows to. Increase your value, and your income will follow. Once you begin to understand that wealth starts in your thinking and flows through the value you create, the next principle becomes unavoidable. You must learn how to handle what you already have. Because it doesn't matter how much money comes into your life if you don't have the discipline and wisdom to manage it. Increase without stewardship leads to loss every single time. A lot of people are asking for more income, more opportunities, more success. But what they're not asking is, am I managing what I already have effectively? Because the truth is, the habits you have with a little are the same habits you'll carry into having a lot, just on a bigger scale. If you're careless with a small amount, you won't suddenly become careful with a large amount. If you lack discipline now, more money won't fix that. It will expose it. That's why some people experience increase, but it never lasts. It's not that they didn't have the opportunity, it's that they didn't have the capacity to sustain it. Stewardship is about capacity. It's about becoming the kind of person who can be trusted with more. And trust is built through consistency. It's in the small decisions you make every day, how you spend, how you save, how you invest, how you prioritize. These decisions may seem insignificant in the moment, but over time, they compound into either growth or loss. And most people underestimate the power of those small, consistent choices. They think wealth comes from one big breakthrough, one big opportunity. But more often than not, wealth is the result of managing small resources wisely over a long period of time. Let's make it practical. If someone gives you a small amount of money, what do you do with it? Do you consume it immediately, or do you look for ways to multiply it? That answer reveals your level of stewardship, because consumers spend first and think later. Stewards think first and then decide how to allocate. They understand that money is a tool, not just for living, but for building. And when you start seeing money as a seed instead of just a resource, your behavior begins to change. You stop asking, what can I buy? And you start asking, what can this become? That shift right there is powerful, because now, instead of using everything you have for immediate gratification, you begin to position yourself for long-term growth. You begin to invest, not just financially, but in your skills, your knowledge, your opportunities, and over time, those investments begin to produce returns. This is where multiplication comes in. Multiplication doesn't happen by accident. It happens when something is managed intentionally, when you take what you have, no matter how small, and you use it in a way that creates more. That's how increase is designed to work. But here's the challenge. Most people want multiplication without management. They want results without responsibility. And it just doesn't work that way, because the level of your stewardship determines the level of your increase. If you can't manage your time, your money, your opportunities at this level, why would you expect to be given more at the next level? It's not about deserving, it's about demonstrating readiness. And readiness is proven through action. It's in how you show up when nobody's watching. It's in how you handle what seems small and insignificant, because nothing is insignificant when it's a test of your capacity. Every resource you have right now is an opportunity to prove that you're ready for more. Your income, your time, your relationships, your skills. How are you managing them? Are you maximizing them, or are you letting them go to waste? Because whatever you do with what you have today is preparing you for what you'll have tomorrow. And here's something else to understand. Stewardship is not about perfection. It's about progress. You don't have to get everything right, but you do have to be intentional. You have to be willing to learn, to adjust, to grow. Because as your stewardship improves, so does your capacity. And as your capacity grows, so does your ability to handle increase. This is why some people seem to attract more opportunities, more resources, more success. It's not random. It's a reflection of their ability to manage what they've already been given. They've developed the discipline, the awareness, the responsibility that makes them ready for more. So instead of focusing on getting more, focus on becoming more responsible with what you already have. Because when you prove you can be trusted with little, you position yourself to receive much. Master what's in your hands, and more will find its way to you. Now, as your thinking begins to elevate, as you start increasing your value and managing what you already have with intention, there's another principle that most people overlook, but it's often the very thing standing between where you are and where you want to be. And that is obedience. Because here's the reality. Many people are asking for answers while ignoring instructions. They're praying for opportunities, praying for increase, praying for change. But when direction comes, they hesitate, they delay, they negotiate. And in doing so, they unknowingly block the very thing they've been asking for. See, opportunity doesn't always come looking like opportunity. Sometimes it comes looking like a simple instruction, something that doesn't seem big, something that may not even make complete sense in the moment. But hidden inside that instruction is access to your next level. The problem is most people are waiting for clarity before they move. But growth doesn't come from clarity. It comes from obedience, because clarity often follows action, not the other way around. You don't always get the full picture up front. You get the next step. And what you do with that step determines whether or not you move forward. Think about it. How many times have you felt prompted to do something? Start something, stop something, reach out to someone, invest in something, and instead of acting, you hesitated, you overthought it, you talked yourself out of it, and later you realized that was an opportunity you missed. That's not coincidence. That's misalignment. Because when you ignore the instruction, you delay the outcome. Obedience is what bridges the gap between knowing and experiencing. You can have all the right information, all the right ideas, all the right intentions, but until you act on them, nothing changes. And here's where it gets even more important. Obedience requires trust, not just trust in the outcome, but trust in the process. Trust that even when something doesn't make sense, there's a greater purpose behind it. Because not every instruction is convenient. Not every step feels comfortable, but every step has the potential to position you for something greater. This is where most people fall short. They want the reward without the risk. They want the result without the requirement, but it doesn't work like that, because every level of success requires a corresponding level of obedience. And sometimes the instruction is simple. It's being consistent when you don't feel like it. It's taking action when you're unsure. It's making a decision that aligns with your growth instead of your comfort. These may not seem like big moves, but they create momentum. And momentum changes everything, because once you start moving, things begin to shift. New ideas come, new connections appear, new opportunities open up. But none of that happens until you take that first step. Obedience is often the trigger. It's the thing that activates what's been waiting for you. Now, here's something else to understand. Delayed obedience is still disobedience. When you know what to do and you keep putting it off, you're not protecting yourself, you're holding yourself back, because timing matters. There are opportunities that are only available in certain moments, and when those moments pass, they don't always come back the same way. That's why it's so important to act when you recognize the instruction, not perfectly, not fearlessly, but faithfully. Because courage doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you move anyway. It means you trust enough to take the step, even when you can't see the whole path. And over time, those steps build confidence. They strengthen your ability to hear, to act, to follow through. And as that ability grows, so does your capacity for greater opportunities. Because now you're no longer just someone who wants change. You're someone who moves with direction. And direction is powerful, because when you combine the right thinking, the right value, the right stewardship, and consistent obedience, you create alignment. And alignment is what produces results that look extraordinary to others, but are actually the natural outcome of following principles that work. So instead of waiting for the perfect moment, move on the instruction you already have. Because your next level is not waiting on more information. It's waiting on your obedience. Act when it's time, and doors will open that effort alone could never unlock. Now, as all of this begins to come together, your thinking shifts, your value increases, your stewardship improves, and your obedience becomes consistent. There's one principle that ties it all together, and at the same time challenges almost everyone who hears it, because it goes against what we've been taught. It goes against what feels natural, and yet it works with a level of consistency that cannot be ignored. And that principle is giving. Most people see giving as losing. They see it as something you do when you have extra, when you're comfortable, when you've already secured yourself. But that way of thinking keeps people stuck, because in this system, giving is not the result of wealth. It's a pathway to it. That's hard for people to accept because it requires trust. It requires you to believe that letting go is not the same as losing, that what leaves your hand does not leave your life. It simply moves into a different form. And here's what most people miss. Giving is not just about money. It's about value. It's about contribution. It's about creating impact beyond yourself. When you give, you are participating in a cycle that was designed to multiply, not diminish. Think about it like this. Every time you give, you are planting. And every seed carries within it the potential for more. But seeds don't multiply in your hand. They multiply when they're released. As long as you hold on to everything, trying to protect it, you limit its ability to grow. That's why people who operate from a scarcity mindset struggle with this principle. Because scarcity says, hold on to what you have, protect it, don't risk it. But abundance says, there is more where that came from. Release it, and it will return multiplied. And the truth is, both mindsets produce results. If you hold tightly, you may keep what you have for a moment, but you also stop the flow. But when you give strategically, intentionally, you activate a cycle that continues to produce over time. Now let's be clear, this is not about random giving. It's not about being careless or irresponsible. It's about being purposeful. It's about understanding where to give, when to give, and why you're giving. Because when giving is aligned with purpose, it becomes powerful. You're not just giving something away, you're positioning yourself within a system that rewards generosity. And here's where it connects back to everything else we've talked about. When your thinking is right, you don't give out of fear, you give out of faith. When you understand value, you don't just give money. You give solutions, ideas, opportunities. When your stewardship is strong, you don't give recklessly, you give wisely. And when you're obedient, you give when you're led, not just when it's convenient. That's when this principle begins to work at its highest level, because now giving is no longer an isolated action. It becomes part of who you are. It becomes a lifestyle. You become someone who looks for ways to contribute, ways to serve, ways to make a difference. And what happens is the more you give, the more you grow, not just financially, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Because giving expands your capacity. It stretches your perspective. It breaks the grip of fear and replaces it with confidence. You begin to realize that you are not limited by what you have. You are empowered by what you can create and contribute. And over time, that realization changes everything. Because now, instead of living from a place of lack, you live from a place of overflow. You stop asking, do I have enough? And you start asking, where can I make the greatest impact? And that shift puts you in a completely different category, because the marketplace and life itself responds to those who add value generously. There's something about a person who gives consistently, who serves intentionally, who contributes without constantly calculating what they'll get in return. That kind of person becomes a magnet for opportunity. Doors open. Connections form, resources flow, not by accident, but by alignment. Because giving positions you to receive in ways that effort alone never could. And no, it doesn't always come back the same way you gave it. Sometimes it comes back through opportunities, sometimes through relationships, sometimes through ideas that create far more than what you released, but it comes back. That's the principle. So instead of holding back, waiting for the right time, understand this. The right time is when you decide to trust the system enough to participate in it. Because at the end of the day, it's not about how much you keep. It's about how much you release with purpose. Give with intention and watch your life multiply.